Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Mike Halloran of Mercer, and we're talking about executive incentive plans. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, Allison.
So talk about the growing interest in metric selection. Why is that important?
It's important for several reasons. You hear companies talking all the time about trying to make sure that their incentive plans are aligned with strategy. And the most important way to do that is to ensure that the metrics that you're using in the incentive plans are those that are most closely aligned with business strategy. And so that pretty much ties it together, the growing interest from that perspective.
And do you see any variance between industries in the metrics that they're using? And maybe do you have a couple of examples?
Sure, significant variation. So let's start with capital-intensive industries. You really need to have some kind of return on investment because of the major dollars you're investing in the business from time to time. Take the oil and gas industry, chemical industry, places like that. On the flip side, you look at those that are more consumer-facing. Consumer goods companies these days, growing the top line in a fairly low inflation environment is very difficult. So, usually revenue growth is a substitute for basically unit volume growth, meaning you're expanding market share and the like. So for those kinds of companies, they really can't increase profitability without growing the top line. So those are just several examples of the differences by industry.
And why has goal setting become so important?
Well, once you get the metric set, then the issue becomes how do you challenge the team to grow the company at a higher rate, a more efficient rate or the like. So it all comes down to goal setting. And the goal setting side of things, certainly where the goals are set has a meaningful impact on how incentive programs might pay out. You set the goals too rigorous, the team might miss the goal and their payments would be under what might be expected. You set them too easy, you may have large payouts, but yet shareholders might think you really didn't perform. So there's a very difficult balance of where do you set the right goal, where you set the bar is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge these days.
You've talked about alignment with corporate strategies. How do you make sure that your metrics and those goals you're setting have good alignment?
Several things. There are a number of studies that most companies run to look at what are the 2 or 3 metrics that align most with increases in shareholder value. That's one way to get there. With respect to goals, a typical approach many use is to take a look at the industry. How quickly has it been growing? What have been the standards that others in the sector have achieved? Are we there or not? If not, we need to challenge ourselves more. And if we're at the head of the pack, then we need to just try to maintain that. Those are different ways that people get at that.
So in addition to goals and targets, how are ranges being set these days?
Oh, a very good question. So once you've set this target, there is the issue of, well, how high do we need to perform to get a very strong payout? And also, where's the bar at which we won't pay anything at all? And so that's the real difficult challenge these days. So more and more time is spent not only just on setting the target, but also the threshold and then the maximum. The ways in which those are set have to do with perhaps what would be best-in-class performance. Maybe that's where the maximum is set. The threshold might be, what did we do last year? Or what's the low end of the industry? We certainly don't want to be there. So those types of thought processes help to define the banding in many cases.
Are we seeing much relative performance in incentive plans these days?
We see a fair amount in long-term incentive plans. Many companies that use relative TSR, clearly that's against other companies' stock price performance. In long-term plans, you do see a little more financial relative performance. In annual plans, much less common. Typically, annual plans are more around what are we going to do this year against the budget and goals we've set, and less about how we've performed against others, recognizing you probably set your goals looking at how others have been performing. The other issue with relative performance in an annual plan is that you really would like to make payouts in January or February. Most companies do. You usually don't get the data on how your peers have performed early enough to get that analysis done.
Those sound like some great keys to executive incentive plan success. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.